In the O Come, Emmanuel hymn version of tonight's antiphon, we hear these words: O come, thou Lord of might, who to thy tribes on Sinai's height in ancient times didst give the law in cloud and majesty and awe. This verse doesn't quite contain or translate all that we find in the Latin antiphon that we just heard sung. That can be rendered in English this way: O Lord and ruler of the house of Israel, who appeared to Moses in the flame of the burning bush and gave him the law on Sinai, come and redeem us with an outstretched arm. Whereas yesterday's antiphon, we heard about wisdom and prayed that wisdom, Christ, the Messiah, would come. We move from Christ active in the work of creation, and in tonight's antiphon, we see him active in the work of salvation history in the Old Testament. And tonight's antiphon draws from one of the most important events in the Old Testament, that of the Exodus, Israel's deliverance from slavery in Egypt to a covenant relationship with the Lord in the land promised to them. And the antiphon focuses on two events that occurred at Mount Sinai. First, the revelation to Moses of his vocation, and then finally, with the giving of the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. So that first episode we find in Exodus chapter 3. At this point, Moses has already fled Egypt. He's a fugitive. He's failed in his attempt to bring freedom to his people, and so now he finds himself in Midian, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. While he's there, on Mount Horeb, on Mount Sinai, he sees something that catches his attention: the burning bush. Now, in a desert, that a bush would catch on fire is not particularly noteworthy. But what the sacred author tells us, what Moses tells us, is that this bush was on fire but not consumed. He's curious, and so he goes. He goes over to it, and as he approaches, he's rebuked. He's reminded that he's on sacred ground. So he's invited to take off his feet, and he enters then into a conversation with the Lord, who reveals himself to be the God of his ancestors, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Now he's the God of Moses as well. And he entrusts to Moses a mission to be the leader and the liberator of God's own people. Moses is not too ready to accept this mission. He says, well, who am I to tell the people sent me? Who should I say that you are that sent me to do this? And in that moment, the Lord reveals to Moses his name, that sacred name of Yahweh. I am who I am, or I am the one who is, the God of his ancestors. Now, that term, that name of the Lord, that sacred name of the Lord, you can see here the Hebrew name, those 4 letters, YHWH. Out of reverence, when the Jewish people were reading the scriptures and they would come across God's proper name there in the scriptures, they wouldn't pronounce it. They would use the term Adonai, which means my Lord. This is the Hebrew word that Jews used when they found that tetragrammaton. It's a great word for Scrabble. It just means the 4-letter word. That 4-letter word for God's name that they held too sacred to pronounce in the context of their liturgy. You might remember a few years ago that Pope Benedict asked Catholics to do the same thing. In 2008, he directed us not to use that sacred name in the liturgy, and so some of our hymns were changed as well. So we have the Lord who appears to Moses in the flame of the burning bush, revealing to him his name, and that's where we get the title for this evening's O antiphon. It's O Adonai, or O Lord and ruler of the house of Israel. So that's the first episode that tonight's antiphon evokes. The second is that of the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. Now, after the Exodus experience, after they are set free from Pharaoh's slavery, they're back in the desert, the people now, and they find themselves on Mount Sinai, and Moses goes up the mountain, and with lightning and thunder, with that cloud that descends, the Lord gives to Moses the 10 Commandments, gives to him the law. And there at Mount Sinai, the Lord establishes a covenant, a relationship with his people, that he would be their God and they would be his own people. There he establishes how they are now to live out this covenant with him through the law. And he shows himself not just to be their Lord, but the ruler of their lives. So now in the antiphon we come to the petition, "Come and redeem us with an outstretched arm." That image of the outstretched arm is something that's very evocative in the text from Exodus, right? Because as they are leaving Egypt, as they are leaving slavery, they find themselves against the shore of the Red Sea. And behind them, coming up quickly, is Pharaoh and his army. What does the Lord have Moses do but stretch out his arm with the staff over the sea, and the waters part into two. The people of Israel are then able to pass dry-shod through the Red Sea to the opposite side, to freedom. That the Lord, by having Moses stretch out his arm, redeems his people, saves them from Pharaoh and his army, leading them to that freedom. We can see in this experience from Exodus a type or a prefiguring of Christ and the redemption that he came to bring. You can see in the light of the burning bush or the lightning and thunder on Mount Sinai as he's giving the law to be foreshadowing the light of Christ that he would bring on that first Christmas. Another prefiguring is that of the bush, right? The bush is on fire but not consumed. Spiritual fathers have seen in this an image of the incarnation, how Christ in his divinity took on our humanity, but it was not consumed. Our humanity was not destroyed when Christ came. Moses ascends Mount Sinai to give the law, and Christ in Matthew's Gospel on the Mount of Beatitudes lays out his vision of the kingdom. In the Exodus experience, the people of Israel are led from slavery to freedom, while Christ leads us from slavery to sin into the freedom of the children of God. In fact, we see this, or rather we hear this, how Christ stretched out his arms on the cross to draw all people to himself. In the preface to the second Eucharistic prayer, we hear these words, "He stretched out his hands as he endured his passion, so as to break the bonds of death and manifest the resurrection." Tonight, as we pray this antiphon, we might stop and ask ourselves, what is it that we need to be set free from? What has us trapped as slaves? Is there an addiction, a grudge that we've held on to, some bitterness? We pray that the Lord, Adonai, the ruler of the house of Israel, might come to us, to redeem us with his outstretched arm. In the Christmas carol, "Good Christian Men Rejoice," we are reminded that Christ was born for this. For this purpose, he wants to redeem us with his outstretched arm, just as he did the people of Israel in their Exodus. But we have to remember that just as the people had to leave behind what they knew, so too you and I have to be willing to leave behind the familiarity of sin that we've become accustomed to, so that we can follow him. Tonight, as we pray this antiphon, let us ask the Lord to stretch out his hand, his arm over us, to redeem us and rescue us from slavery to sin, and that we might follow him wherever his outstretched arm leads us.